So thanks again for everybody who's logged in for this afternoon session for about self-care for caregivers, which is such an important topic. We've all been under some form of quarantine and had some added pressures. And so today's speaker is going to really help us address those issues. My name is Juanita. I work with the Spina Bifida Association with the National Resource Center. And joining us today, we have Jackie Papadakis. She is a medical psychologist at the Spina Bifida Center at Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Juanita. Yes, I'm really happy to be here talking with all of you today. As Juanita said, I'm a medical psychologist working in the Spina Bifida Center at Lurie Children's Hospital. I do a lot of work with families and kids of all ages, young kids, teenagers, young adults with spina bifida. And I also do a lot of research in the area of spina bifida. So I'm really happy to be talking with all of you today.
Great, thank you. And so today we're going to talk about what exactly is self-care, why it's important for caregivers, especially during this time of COVID-19, how self-care needs might change over time, which is an interesting question, and how can caregivers practice self-care, some realistic ways to practice self-care in this time. And Jackie is also going to give us some tools and resources for self-care. And to ask a question, you should be seeing in your toolbar, an option to send in questions. It's the Q&A button. And so please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, and then we will take them at the end. Towards the end of the session, we will address your questions, but please make sure that you send questions because that's, we really want to hear from you. And Jackie, please tell us what you were going to tell us.
Okay, thanks, Juanita. So 2 things I want to say before I get started. I'm going to talk about self-care today, and I just want to point out that the Spina Bifida Association had a webinar earlier in April titled, How is COVID-19 Affecting Your Mental Health? And this was a great webinar by Courtney Wolf Christensen and Lauren Burdett that you can access now by going to SBA's website to watch. And I just want to highlight that that also is a really great webinar that talks about how we're all experiencing a lot of stress right now during COVID, and it gives a lot of great suggestions for how to manage that stress. So that's somewhat similar to my talk today, but different. So just want to encourage you to watch that later if you haven't already. And everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's cross our fingers that we have no Zoom issues today. And the second thing I wanted to say is that today I'll be using the word caregivers throughout. And I just wanted to explain that by caregivers, I mean any parent, grandparent, relative, or even non-relative, anybody who is routinely taking care of a child or adult with spina bifida. Okay, so to get things started, first, what is self-care? Many definitions out there if you were to Google what self-care is. The definition that I like is that it is any activity that we do deliberately and on a regular basis to reduce stress and maintain and enhance health. So the key words here are regular basis. Self-care is really about stuff that we do routinely as part of our everyday lives to try to really keep our stress down and promote overall health. So self-care is similar to what many people know as of coping. But usually when we talk about coping, we're talking about if there's like a stressor in your life, okay, what are you going to do to cope with that stressor? Whereas self-care I think of as being more preventative. These are things that we're doing to try to prevent stress and maintain our well-being. And self-care is important for everyone. So, today I'm talking about it in the context of, being a caregiver of someone with an individual with spina bifida, but self-care is important no matter how old you are, and no matter what role you may have in your life. Okay, so what is self-care? Again, it includes a lot of different activities. So this image here on the screen is a self-care wheel that just gives a sampling of different activities that could be considered self-care. And they're organized in these different domains. So physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, personal, and professional. And I'll go into detail later about all these more specific activities, but just to give you some examples, self-care could be things like, practicing yoga on a regular basis, or sitting down to do a puzzle at the end of the night, or calling a friend that you haven't talked to in a while, taking a warm bath, maybe going out to the garage and working on your car. It could be things like going to therapy, or actually taking your lunch break at work. So all sorts of things are included when we're talking about this big umbrella term of self-care. So here's just a few examples. And what's important that you know and think about as we're talking today is that self-care looks different for everybody. That's why we're kind of vague when we talk about it, because some things work for some people and some things work for other people. So why is self-care important for caregivers? Why are we even talking about this today? Well, all caregivers, parents, they all juggle many, many demands. But we know that if you're the caregiver or a parent of someone with spina bifida, you tend to juggle even more. Now, research that's been done on families of individuals with spina bifida has fortunately shown that families are very resilient. And what that means is that despite additional stressors that might be in your life, or adversity that you may face, that these families do just as well, if not better, than other families that may not have a child with spina bifida. So this is great news. Families are resilient. However, there's also a lot of research out there that shows that when you're a caregiver or parent of someone with spina bifida, you are more likely to experience stress, depression, and anxiety. And they found this to be the case for a variety of reasons. But what this suggests is that caregivers of individuals with spina bifida really need to prioritize their self-care. They really need to take care of themselves and their well-being, because they may be at risk for more stress in their lives. And fortunately, there's also a lot of research that shows that doing things like routine self-care is something that can improve emotional and psychological well-being. And this is really true for everyone. They're finding this even for little kids, like as young as preschoolers, that doing things like daily meditation improves their overall emotional well-being. So it's really exciting now that we're having more research that shows that doing some of these things, even if they seem kind of small and not that important, that they actually are really important for our overall health. Okay, we know that self-care is important, especially if you're the caregiver of someone with spina bifida. Why is it even more important now? I think everyone has a good sense of why that might be. COVID-19, of course, has not only been threatening lives, but our livelihood. And our livelihood is really just important. Many of us are experiencing high levels of stress, feeling uncertain, feelings of loss of control, grief, loss, increased isolation, not to mention that many of us are trying to navigate working from home or even having lost our job, navigating e-learning. So these are all a lot of challenges that many people are going through right now that certainly aren't easy. And these might be challenges that people are experiencing really for the first time in their life. And so this is true for everyone, but we know that if you're a family of someone that has certain or special healthcare needs, that you might even be facing more challenges right now because there are likely to be disruptions to things like medical care, home health care services, maybe even getting access to medical supplies or maybe as quickly as you're used to. Certainly, we know that there's been disruptions in education across the country, special education especially, and therapies, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapies. Many people aren't getting these like they used to, or not to the same degree. Physical therapy over video, at least it's better than nothing, but it's not quite the same. And then social engagement. All of us really rely on our social engagement, and there's a lot of activities right now that may be considered extracurricular that aren't happening. And a lot of families, and certainly kids and adults with certain healthcare needs, may really rely on these. So, I think all of you probably are agreeing with me that yes, right now during COVID-19, this is a hard time. Okay, so we know that so far self-care is really important for caregivers, especially if you're the caregiver of somebody with spina bifida, especially right now during COVID. So I hope I've sold you on that. Next thing to kind of think about is, what gets in the way of self-care? And I think that it's really these two things mainly, doubt and guilt. So what I mean by doubt is that it's really common to doubt that, self-care is even necessary, or that it's important, that it'll even help you. So many people will say things like, self-care is just another thing I have to do. It's just another obligation, another thing on my to-do list, or it's not really going to work. It's not going to make much of a difference anyways. What's the point? It won't really help. I'm too busy. I just don't have enough time to take a break in my day to practice self-care. Or I'm just too tired by the end of the day. I just want to go to sleep. Or maybe, I don't have the money to practice self-care the way that I want to or think I need to. So a lot of doubt that self-care will work or that it's important. And then also a lot of guilt. So, parents and caregivers, they may experience guilt for lots of reasons, but oftentimes there's this idea that practicing self-care or doing things for yourself is somehow selfish when you have a family. And that's not at all true, but it's very common to think, oh, it's selfish to focus on myself, or if I have any extra time in my day, I really should be, doing XYZ for my family. My family's needs, my children's needs come first. And, certainly, we want to be taking care of our families, but it's not selfish to be taking care of yourself also and to focus on yourself. So doubt and guilt and a lot of feelings around doubt and guilt, that's usually what tends to get in the way of us practicing self-care and making it a part of our lives. So when people do express this to me, like, doubt or guilt, I encourage them to think about a few things that I'll go through here now. So my first question that I encourage you to think about is, if you don't prioritize your well-being, who will? Whose responsibility is it to take care of yourself? And usually the answer is that it's your responsibility to take care of yourself and to prioritize your well-being. A second thing to consider is, if you're not okay, how can you help your children or your loved ones be okay? So if you look at this picture on the right side of the screen, for any of you that have ever been on a flight before, this will look familiar. It's a picture of a woman who's on an airplane, the oxygen mask drops down, and she is properly putting the oxygen mask on herself first, and then she is helping secure the oxygen mask onto the child next to her. And the quote or the flight attendant will usually say something like, place the oxygen mask on yourself first before helping other children or others who may need your assistance. So this is really the perfect metaphor for self-care, because if this woman on a plane doesn't get her own oxygen mask on first and something happens to her, then she's not going to be a help to anybody. And so that's really the idea here is take care of yourself, make sure you have oxygen, and then you're going to be available to take care of the people around you. A third point to consider is that taking care of ourselves models a very important life skill for our children and loved ones, no matter what age they are. Our children are always, and teenagers, young adults, we're always being watched when we're a caregiver, and our kids are learning from what we do. And so when you show them that prioritizing your well-being and practicing self-care every day is something that's important and that is important that you do, they will learn that that's something that they should be doing too. And as they get older, they will probably be more likely to also do that. So really good modeling for our kids. Another point to consider is that our families want us to feel good too. You know, as a pediatric psychologist, I work, you know, with kids, teenagers, young adults, and I can tell you that the thing that most youth worry about the most is their parents or their grandparents or their families. You know, they say, I'm worried about dad, he seems so stressed. I'm worried about mom, she seems really burnt out. You know, our families worry about us. And so, you know, if with us taking care of ourselves and doing what we need to do to be in a good place, that's going to help them too and make them feel good. And then this quote here at the bottom is just, I think, a really nice quote that really highlights what self-care is all about. It says, self-care is not about self-indulgence, it's about self-preservation. Okay, Okay, so how do our self-care needs change over time? This is a good question to think about, especially because as caregivers, lots of things change over the course of, you know, your child's lifetime. So one thing that changes is certainly your capacities as a caregiver or a parent. Your skills and confidence probably are much different when your child is older than when you first brought, you know, a newborn home. Also, your relationship with your child certainly changes from when they're a newborn to, you know, by the time they're an adult. But what's really interesting is that a lot of research has actually shown that it doesn't really matter how old your children are, that the stress you experience that's related to caring for them, it actually stays pretty constant across the lifetime. So some people say, oh, it was so stressful when they were little, it's easier now, or vice versa. Oh, now that they're a teenager, it's much more stressful. But again, most of the research tells us actually parents' levels of stress stays the same. And what that tells us is that it's not so much about how old your child is or what they're going through, as much as it is how you actually cope with stress. That's really the key. That, you know, some people do really good over time with learning how to manage their own stress, and some people don't. But this just really highlights that stress management is important, and self-care is a key piece to that. Other things to consider in terms of like how does self-care change over time is that the way we find time to practice self-care, we may find ourselves with more flexibility as our kids get older. Not always, but usually, because once children are older, they usually require less monitoring and can be left alone more, which just frees up more flexibility and when we can find time to do the things we need to do for ourselves. Also, the activity that you choose to engage in for self-care may change because our interests and needs change over time. You know, maybe initially, you know, just getting to watch your favorite TV show for 30 minutes at the end of the night, that's as much self-care as you need. But maybe as you go on, you decide, you know, you need to start exercising more, or you want to practice yoga, or you want to learn a new hobby. Our children and partners may also want to join us over time too, and that's certainly okay. And then lastly, the importance of self-care may change over time. And that's a very important thing to think about. And I like thinking about it in this, you know, the harder it rains, the more we need our umbrella. If it's drizzling outside, you don't need your umbrella to make it from, you know, your car to the grocery store front door. But if it's pouring, you really do want that umbrella. And that's how I think about self-care. You know, self-care is that umbrella that when life hits you hard and there's a lot of stress, you really need that good self-care to kind of to help you manage your stress and to fall back on to make sure that you're maintaining your well-being. Okay, so I'm going to just talk a little bit more about, you know, okay, how do we actually practice self-care and what are some tips that you can kind of consider when you're thinking about how can you make self-care more of your daily routine. So there are probably hundreds of ideas you could come up with ways you could practice self-care. I'm just going to share some with you on this slide and then the next. And then some of the resources I'm sharing also have some ideas as well. So if you think about, and you don't have to think about self-care in these buckets, but sometimes I think it's helpful, especially if you try to pick activities in self-care that fall within each bucket. But so physical self-care. So this could include things like sticking to a consistent sleep schedule, making sure you get to bed at a certain time every night so you can get your 7 hours or however much sleep you need. Exercising, that's a big one, getting a massage, or even something like if you're sick, actually call in to work and call in sick and take the day to recuperate. Psychological self-care can include anything from doing things like meditating, to journaling, to going to individual therapy, to going to a group therapy or joining a support group, or could even include something like turning your email off at a certain time of night so that you're not bombarded with emails, work emails. Relationship social self-care includes things like, going on a date with your partner, or maybe scheduling a friend date, calling an old friend that you haven't talked to, maybe even volunteering at a soup kitchen or at a community center, or it could even include something like asking someone for help. You have a lot of things to do, and even just asking for some support from someone else, that's even considered self-care. Spiritual self-care could include anything from, praying or attending church, or, some other kind of spiritually oriented community. Even spending time in nature can feel very spiritual. Emotional self-care could include things like making a list of positive affirmations about yourself that you tell yourself every morning. Some people may think that sounds kind of cheesy, but it really helps, and it's really beneficial. And you can never give yourself too much love. I'm a big believer in that. Or you could just ask yourself, what would be something that would actually be really fun for me or exciting, and you can kind of treat yourself and do an actual fun activity. Or even allowing yourself to go into your bedroom and cry for 5 minutes and not feel guilty about it. That is even emotional self-care. Workplace or professional self-care can include things like, I mentioned this earlier, if it's your lunch break, actually stop and eat your lunch and enjoy it instead of trying to work through your lunch hour, if you can. Chatting with a coworker, decorating your workspace so it's more pleasant, things like that. And then lastly, there's kind of this general category that includes all sorts of types of self-care. So things like taking up a new hobby or an old hobby, anything, woodworking, painting, knitting, working on your car, scrapbooking, playing the piano. It could be all sorts of things. Watching your favorite TV show. There's certainly, nothing wrong with, watching TV. And if you find, there's a movie you really want to watch and you haven't got to, sitting down and making time to really watch that movie, that's self-care too. Pampering yourself, maybe you get a massage, you kind of get your nails done, you buy yourself something nice that you've been working towards. Gardening, wearing even a fun outfit. Like, these are all different examples of self-care you could be doing. Okay, so now I want to talk through just tips on how to actually make this happen, because maybe you're sold like, okay, yeah, self-care is important and there's some different things I can do, but we all know that life gets very busy and it's very easy to let days go by and say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to start. So here are some ideas on how to really make sure that self-care becomes a routine part of your everyday life. So the first thing is, create a long list of options that you think will actually work for you. So if there's no part of you that wants anything to do with yoga and you just don't care for it, that is fine. Don't force yourself to do yoga. You don't have to put it on your self-care list. That's okay. Think of other things. you want to ask yourself, like, what actually makes me feel good emotionally, mentally, physically? What do I want to do? Ask yourself those questions and then kind of come up with a list of some things that you might think can work for you. And then a good place to start is with the basics. So everybody has to sleep and everybody has to eat. And so that's a good place to start. So setting a consistent bedtime and getting enough sleep every night, actually waking up feeling rested, that's really good self-care. Or in terms of eating, maybe trying to turn the TV off when you're having dinner at night and just enjoying your food or talking with your family, that's also good self-care. Also starting small. So don't expect yourself, I'm going to exercise for an hour and a half every night. Maybe that's unrealistic. Maybe you don't have the time. Maybe just 15 minutes a day. And 15 minutes of your day is pretty much 1% of your entire day. And I think everybody's worth at least 1%. So when you think about it that way, like, okay, can I dedicate 1% of my day to doing self-care? The answer is probably yes. And make it part of your routine. If you decide first thing in the morning when I wake up, before anyone else is up, I'm going to have my coffee and look out the window and just practice reciting some things that I'm grateful for, for 10 minutes or 15 minutes in the morning. If you do that every morning, it's going to be really easy to stick with that. But also you want to allow yourself to be spontaneous. So if on a certain day you think, it's been a day, I could really use some self-care time, then you definitely want to go for it. You don't have to wait till the next morning to have your coffee and think about things. Okay, some more tips. So I kind of already mentioned this, but do what you want and what you look forward to. And if it starts to feel like an obligation, then you want to try something else. So if you decide, okay, I'm going to read this book every night before I go to bed, 30 minutes of reading time, and then you find that you're not really looking forward to reading, and maybe you're kind of avoiding it or making excuses for why you can't read tonight, and maybe you're not really into the book, that's okay. If this is something that you're dreading and you don't really want to do, just set it aside and pick something else. Pick a different activity. You want this to be fun and enjoyable. You can either stay consistent with what you do or mix it up. So, some people like to, they want to do they pick their self-care activity. This is what I do for self-care, and I do it, every day or every Sunday, and I've been doing this for years. That's great. Or if you want to mix it up, try new things, there's nothing wrong with that either. Another tip here, not all self-care tasks are created equal. So what I mean by that is, there are certain activities that are a little bit more, kind of just distraction self-care, things that we might enjoy, but that might not necessarily be meeting our needs. So for example, Candy Crush, if any of you aren't familiar with Candy Crush, it's a very popular game that people play on their phone. Sometimes, say you're, on the bus on your way home, taking 30 minutes to play Candy Crush during that commute is really enjoyable for you and you love it. That's great if that's your self-care. But maybe you actually are realizing, that doesn't really do it for me. I really need some kind of social engagement. Then, you might need to think about meeting up with a friend or calling a friend, and that's really your self-care, not just Candy Crush. And then a couple more tips here. Sometimes self-care and obligations overlap, and that is certainly okay. So it doesn't have to be, chores and obligations or self-care. There's sometimes some crossover. So a good example, I think, is, maybe for some people, is mowing the lawn. So if you have a home where you have to mow your lawn, this is something that, in many states you have to do in the summer months or maybe all year round. And it's kind of a chore. I mean, it's something you have to do to kind of take care of your home. But for many people, they really like it. And it's really kind of peaceful and relaxing. So if on Saturday morning comes and you think, I gotta mow the lawn, but you know what, that sounds really nice. Well, go for it. It's okay for a chore to also be self-care. And lastly, self-care doesn't have to be a solitary activity. Kind of many of the things I've been talking about so far are things you might do alone. But it doesn't have to be that way, certainly not. And this could be something that, our children and our family and our friends are incorporated into. Maybe you're just really, you really would love to just go to a movie. Can the whole family go to a movie together? Or maybe you would love to play Monopoly. It's been years since you've played Monopoly. Well, does your children or does your partner want to play Monopoly with you? Maybe that's your self-care on that Sunday night. And so it doesn't have to be solitary, but it can be.
And Jackie, we had a question for you.
Oh, sure.
So we wanted to know, might it be helpful to share like our self-care plan or like my self-care plan with another person, just to have the other person take a look at the plan?
That is a great question. And I would say yes, absolutely, because there are things that maybe whoever you share it with, that they may have ideas that you haven't thought of. Or they can maybe even help you troubleshoot. If you say, this is my current plan, but I'm having a hard time following through with it, maybe that other person you share it with can help brainstorm with you. So yeah, absolutely. And I think that if you and that person were to kind of co-share your self-care plans, that maybe can get you a little bit more excited about it. For example, so if you have a friend and you're like, hey, I made this self-care plan, you should make one too. Let's share them. Let's talk about them. And then, that's something you routinely do. So, hey, what have you been doing for self-care lately? Or, oh, hey, guess what? I started scrapbooking. That's a new thing for me. So absolutely, yes, I think sharing your self-care plan is a good idea.
Yeah, and it might even be a way to sort of acknowledge to the other person too that is an important thing.
Exactly. It's a way for us to reinforce the importance of it with ourselves and with the other people. Absolutely. A great question.
Thank you.
Okay, so those were some tips for how to really practice self-care. And then I'm getting towards the end here and want to end with just a few questions that I think are important that we reflect on every day. That relate to our self-care right now during this time of COVID-19. Very important question is asking ourselves, what does doing my best look like today? Because doing your best changes from day to day. And, maybe yesterday you woke up on the right side of the bed and you had a great energy level and all the cards fell your way, but maybe that's not the case today. Maybe you didn't get good sleep last night. You have all of these unexpected things coming up. Doing your best is going to look different. And so I think it's important to kind of start every day with, what does my best look like? And so you have appropriate expectations for yourself. And then asking yourself, what do I need to do today and what can wait? So, we all have busy lives and there's usually always certain things to do. I think asking yourself, okay, do I really need to do this today? Or maybe could I take this time to do self-care instead and I'll be able to make time to do this tomorrow? That's always a good question to ask. Another one is, what do I need to do today in order to feel like today was a success? So, kind of when you start your day and thinking when you go to bed at night, what is it that you need to do today or kind of accomplish that's going to make you feel like, okay, today was a success. I did my best. I can feel good about it. Two more things to consider right now during COVID is asking yourself, what can I do for others today that will also help me? So this is especially important as a caregiver when a lot of what you might be doing on a daily basis is caregiving, is taking care of your family, of the people you love, and making sure, they have what they need, their needs are met. And so, taking a moment to stop and say, is there something I can do for them that will also help me? And, this could be anything. If maybe your child or someone in your family is asking you for help with something, maybe they've been asking you a few days to help them out with something, but you've been busy, and is today the day that you can actually help them with that? That'll obviously make them feel good, but that'll make you feel good too. And then one of the most important questions, I think, is asking ourselves, what is the best time today for me to update myself on the news? Now, this isn't true for everybody, but most people tend to get very anxious when, listening to the news, reading the news. We can get pretty anxious without even really realizing it or being aware of it. So, everyone's different in their desire to stay up to date on the latest headlines. But, if you are somebody that the news tends to stress you out, it's probably not benefiting you then to have the TV on with the news on in the background all day long. So, asking yourself, is it best that I check the news in the morning or maybe midday or right before bed? What's going to be best for me right now? Okay, so I just want to end with some of my favorite quotes here that I think really, summarize the essence of self-care. So if you don't mind, I'll just take a minute to kind of read them for us, starting from the top left. So taking care of yourself doesn't mean me first, it means me too. Self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. That one I find very funny. I like that one a lot. An empty tank will take you exactly nowhere. Time to refuel. Almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. It's also a funny one. To be a good parent, you need to take care of yourself so that you can have the physical and emotional energy to take care of your family. It's not selfish to take care of yourself. A healthier, stronger, happier you is better able to care for those depending on you. And then lastly, you owe yourself the love that you so freely give others. So, so that is it. So I'm a big fan of self-care. So if anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer them. Also, if you are someone that routinely does practice self-care and you would like to just share a comment of what you feel is most helpful for you, of course, remember that, this is a public webinar, so only share with what you're comfortable. But if anyone has any of their own tips or suggestions, you're welcome to kind of share those too using the Q&A feature.
Thank you so much, Jackie. This has been so important and, such a timely thing to discuss. Mm-hmm. So earlier you were speaking about the news and, how that, to sort of limit, that we might need to think about limiting how much news we take in. Mm-hmm. So do you think that listening to the news could be considered negative self-care?
That is a good point. Oh, sorry, I kind of interrupted you. What was the last part?
No, that was it. Yeah, that was it.
Oh, okay. I really like your question there of negative self-care. That is not a term used a lot. I think you just coined it, Juanita, and I like it.
It wasn't mine, but thank you.
Yes. Oh, yeah, right. Whoever had that question, right. That's a great question. I like that term a lot. I'm going to start using that, negative self-care. I would say it depends on the individual, right? Not everybody gets anxious or stressed out from listening to the news. Not everybody does. And so I don't want to suggest that the news is bad for everybody, but for many of us it is. And so I do think that taking a moment and even asking yourself, you turn on your radio, let's say you're listening to the news, you turn it on, listen to it for 5 or 10 minutes, and then, turn it off and do a check-in with yourself. Like, how do I feel right now? Do I feel more edgy? Do I feel more tense? Am I worrying about, when are these shelter and home restrictions going to be lifted? Am I going to get a job? Do you find yourself all of a sudden with these racing thoughts? If that's how you find yourself after listening to the news, then you know that, okay, the news is anxiety provoking. And so ask yourself, how much news do you really need? Yes, I do kind of think it's negative self-care if we know that it's something that's probably not going to help us. Now, on the flip side of that, like I'll say personally for me, I do want to hear a little bit of news kind of every day. Like, I just want to know the main highlights of, okay, what are the big things that happened today, but I don't need to know all the details. And so, you know, for me, it might be checking the headlines on my favorite website for just 5 minutes and being like, okay, I got a general sense of what's going on, but if I go further, that's going to be negative self-care for me. So I'm going to stop there. So it's really about checking in with yourself. And if you know it's not good for you, then don't do it.
Thank you. We had one of the attendees mentioned that she or he started doing YouTube Zumba videos during the quarantine at home, and that doing 30 minutes a day does so much for them. So yeah, that's a really cool thing. And so, you know, one of the questions that I had, and I don't know if they'll be able to respond to that, is, you know, what motivated them to start that? You know, is it something that had they already had a physical fitness routine before and they just thought about incorporating it, or was it something that they did, you know, because they were really feeling the need to do something different? So, oh, she says that I needed exercise without leaving my house during the stay at home order. So yeah.
I think that's great. Yeah, Zumba over Zoom. I think that's really creative, and I've heard a lot of really creative ideas that people have come up with during COVID when people are stuck at home, and I think it really speaks to, you know, how if you're kind of committed to doing self-care, there's a way to do it, even if you're stuck at home, or even if you don't have much available to you. You know, if you have the internet, you know, what Zumba can you find on the internet, or yeah, so I think it really speaks to being creative in times like this.
And what do you think are things that organizations such as the Spina Bifida Association could do to assist family members or caregivers care for themselves?
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, I would say that, you know, everybody, that's a good question. Well, let me start by saying holding webinars like this, I think, is really important. A good place to start, a very good place to start. Because I will say, so self-care, for example, if you were to go on the internet and Google self-care, you'll get certainly lots of hits of all different images and websites and tips, and all of that is helpful, but sometimes, especially in the internet age we're in now, where there's an abundance of information available to us, it really helps, I think, when people can have information presented to them that's kind of condensed and organized. And so, you know, like, you know, SBA or other organizations that present information in, you know, here's information written in a written format, here's information in a video format, here's you know, information, here's a live chat feature. I think offering the resources and information in multiple modes is important, because some people handing them a worksheet or a handout on what self-care is, that might not do it for them, and that might not hit home. Maybe they need to watch a video about it. Vice versa, other people, maybe they want the written materials to read about it and think about it at their own pace. So I think, you know, when we're collecting this information, these resources, providing in a multiple modalities, because it speaks to different people differently, I think that is a good place to start. But I think that allowing, especially right now during COVID, when we're very isolated, the more we can do to kind of encourage social engagement. You know I'm from Chicago, of course. I'm highly involved in the Illinois chapter of the Spina Bifida Association. And, you know, they, of course, all year round are organizing great in-person family, parent, youth activities that right now are, of course, on a hold because of COVID and the need to social distance. And so thinking, you know, what are other ways that we can offer that type of social engagement and support virtually, or respecting social distance? I think that's another good thing that would really promote good self-care.
Out of curiosity, as for caregivers, without, you know, before COVID, you know, definitely one of the things that people might do is definitely like travel or make an effort to attend like a lot of in-person events. now that there is COVID, none of these things are either not existent at all or they're virtual.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that maybe for caregivers, could that remove a little bit of stress, the transportation side of things, or might it, I guess maybe it's an individual thing, but do you think that that has an impact, either positive or negative, not having to physically go somewhere?
I think it's both. You can have a positive or negative. You know, I think no matter how good video is, no matter how quality the video is, that it certainly does not necessarily replace being in person, or being to hug someone, being able to hug someone, or being in a room full of people. But I will say that I think being able to do things virtually does actually make things more accessible to people who it might not have been accessible to before. So, I mean, I'll even share, you know, as a psychologist, I do routine, you know, individual and family therapy with families. And I can say that kind of a silver lining to COVID is that a lot of families would not be able to come see me previously for appointments because of work schedules and school schedules, and they may live an hour or plus outside of Chicago and they can't travel in. But now that we're doing telemedicine and it's virtual, I'm able to see them every week, maybe even sometimes twice a week. And I know as a provider, that's been really important to me, and that's been really helpful for the families. But so I think that is really true for other activities as well. Traveling takes time, getting everyone in the car, you know, and also every family is of different economic means. You know, it can be expensive to go on outings and, you know, use gas money and have to stop and buy lunch outside of the house. These are all things that can be barriers for some families. And so I do think it's both, Juanita.
Okay. Thank you. And another attendee was saying that they see work as self-care. The person says, "I like my job. It is the part of me that is separate from being a mom and caregiver." And she is currently working remotely.
That is wonderful. Yes, and thank you for sharing that, because you're right. For many people, and it sounds like for you, work is something that you enjoy, and I'm so happy for that. You have a job that you enjoy. That's not the case for everyone, and so that's wonderful. And yeah, I think that's especially important right now, is that when you're stuck at home, you can be just stuck in one role or one mode. And so for whoever shared that, if you're able to kind of work at home and put on your professional hat and be in that role, and then kind of switch out and like, okay, now I'm going to be, you know, parent mode. I think that's really important.
Great. And then another person asked, how much sleep should I get for my age? And we don't know how old she is, but we've asked her. So does how much sleep you get depend on, does how much sleep you should get depend on your age?
It does, actually. At least the recommendations that the medical field has put out there, it does depend on your age. So technically, if you think of the lifespan, there's a little bit of a wave that happens. So, you know, starting when a newborn, right? Newborns need, you know, 16, 18 hours of sleep a day. They're always sleeping. And so it starts where you need a lot of sleep. It tends to go down just slightly during the school age years. And then during teenage years, it peaks, actually. And then again, in young adulthood, it kind of drops down. And, you know, don't exactly quote me on this, but I believe that the latest recommendation is that most adults should be getting between 6 and 9 hours of sleep. I mean, that's a range. That's a pretty significant range. 9 hours feels a lot different than 6 for most people. But in general, the kind of older you get into adulthood, the less sleep you tend to need. But, you know, usually it's 7 or more hours for most people. I would encourage you to let's see, some good places to look is always, even the CDC, actually, which is a website that I list with this presentation specific to COVID, but CDC, or the, you know, even pediatrics as a journal, they actually give good information on like the amount of sleep you should be getting across the lifespan. So
Okay.
Everybody's different though. I mean, if you're someone who gets 7 hours of sleep and you wake up and you just don't feel rested, then maybe you're someone who needs 8 or 9. So it's always good to check in on yourself.
Okay. And the person responded, she said she's 22.
22, young adult. Yeah, I don't have the exact recommendations in front of me, but you're probably in that 7 to 9 range. That's a great question.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. I think that those are the questions that we have for now, but I was just curious to go back to our poll for just a second. And I'm sorry that I think it was covering the screen earlier.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't quite sure what that was. I'm sorry if I closed it.
No, I closed it. And I apologize that it was blocking. I thought only I could see it. But so we did a brief poll for the attendees. And so just to know, like if people said that they practice self-care, and we saw that the majority said that they feel like they do. And of course, this is not.
Can I?
Go ahead.
Oh, can everyone see this?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if everybody can see the poll.
Oh, okay. I'm sharing it now. Maybe not everyone can see it. Okay.
But so the poll was basically asking, a yes or no. Do you practice self-care? And 89% said that they do, and 11% said they don't. And then we went on to ask just what are some ways that people take care, what are some things that people do to take care of themselves? And this was definitely not a scientific poll. We did not come up with, all of the options that I'm sure people would have liked to have, but we had take a walk at 67%, followed by taking a nap at 56%. And then we had a tie of 33% for taking a bath and also hiding in the bathroom for 5 minutes. And then we also had a tie between meditating and reading a book, which interestingly, there might be some similarities between those things.
Well, I'm really happy to hear that 89% of you are practicing self-care. That's great. And for the people who aren't, no time to start like the present.
That's right. Yeah, I appreciated that tip that you said, even if it's starting small, whatever it might be, like, exercise or other things, just do just something small or for a short period of time at least. It's certainly something that's doable. It doesn't have to be perfect self-care from the get-go.
Yep. And I think there are lots of tools to help us with that, so many of us have smartphones that have apps, and I'll share some apps, but there's so many apps out there. Just doing a deep breathing exercise for 5 minutes. It's really amazing how if you actually put 5 minutes aside in your day to, practice relaxation, what a positive impact that can have on you that you could feel almost immediately. So 5 minutes even goes a long ways.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, that one of a couple of people asked if the webinar will be accessible, if the recording will be accessible later. And yes, it will be. I should be able to put it up by tomorrow, and that's the website and the page that you should visit to access the webinar. It's very easy. You just go to our homepage, and then right from our homepage, it's very easy to find the COVID-19 page. And then you should be able to see it. And right along with the recording, there will be also the other resources that Jackie shared, the other apps and the websites, et cetera, so that you can practice some self-care and do some reading through those resources.
Great.
So that's all, unless anybody has any more questions. We'll just go ahead and wrap it up, because we know that, Jackie, after this, I think you mentioned you've got a few more hours of work ahead of you.
Yeah, I do.
I hope that you're practicing. So that was a good question. We should have asked you, what do you do for self-care?
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, certainly during COVID, I've finally fallen into a routine that I feel very proud of myself about. My husband and I have started meditating, trying to meditate every day for 10 minutes. We're not always successful every day, but we usually are, and that has been really nice because we're doing it together. And then also taking a walk every night, unless it's raining. And so doing those two things, the meditation during the day and the walk at night, I've really enjoyed, and I kind of look forward to it the most in my day right now. So.
Very good. All right. Well, thanks again, Jackie. We really appreciate your time, and thanks to everybody who was able to join us today. And we'll see you on the recording
Thank
or
you,
at another
everyone.
webinar. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.